see up here, the land is maybe, so we have there's a difference between the land area, which is on the bottom, and the amount of phosphorus and where that phosphorus is coming from, which can be seen in that upper graph.
So one important takeaway is that, you know, this whole larger drainage area, so it's the entire inland sea, which is also referred to as the northeast arm, kind of the two ways that it's referred to in the water quality world. And so, you know, for the entire northeast arm, it's roughly a third forested, and then about a quarter corn, and then another, like, you know, eighth or so hay. But then along Maquam, those, you know, you can see where it's zoomed in here, there's very little forest. And that's not saying there's no trees. That means that there's like no blocks of trees large enough to show up at that mapping scale. And so along Maquam, it's definitely a lot more agriculture, and also a lot of wetlands too, which are the blue areas. And then, so the other takeaway is that, so this upper pie chart shows the relative loading of phosphorus, which is the main water quality concern for Champlain right now. For the entire watershed is, you know, more than half corn, and then another wedge is hay. And so presumably these numbers would be even more extreme for Maquam Shore, just because of what the land cover's like there. Oh. I don't know. Why did we lose it? 1 second. Technical difficulties. I'll turn it off. You can advance now. Okay. Continue.
Okay. Thanks. We're good. Awesome. So I went out a number of times to collect data in the field. So I started off, before I even went out into the field, we did some initial ditch and culvert mapping remotely. So that was using existing culvert data for culvert locations, and then road and field ditches using some LiDAR data, which is high resolution terrain data. So you can see things that are relatively small. So some of the surface level infield ditches are able to be delineated from the computer. Then once I got all that data collected, went out, was able to verify the location of the ditches along the road, which is super important to know where water is flowing, like what culvert specifically is flowing into. And then also taking GPS points at all of the culvert inlets and outlets to lock down the locations, do some assessment of general conditions, and also get some slopes to see how fast the water is moving.
One quick addition. So one thing, you know, in a natural world, water just flows downhill, and you can pretty much just follow the contours and know where the water's going to go. But when you have ditches across the landscape, that can move water kind of sideways. And then also, even more importantly, is the big ditch that runs parallel to the road. And so based on how the ditches are and where the culverts are located, you can end up with a really large drainage area that kind of goes against the overall grade of the landscape, just because of where culverts are. And so it's really important to do this fine scale mapping to figure out how much water drains to each point along the road.
So the combination of that remote mapping and the field mapping resulted in the delineation of 21 different watersheds, 1 watershed per culvert. And this is over most of the study area. Some of the southern area was not included in this mapping, but as we can see, there's a variety of different watershed sizes, with watershed number 12 being the largest, with many smaller watersheds up in the north. Then after all these drainage areas were determined, we conducted an analysis of culvert capacity, which is the amount of water that can flow through a culvert while having it still functioning without backing up and overflowing into the road. So the way we did this, we took a combination of the land cover and the soils to assess roughly how fast water flows over each of those different combinations, and then ran it through several different storms, ranging from the 2-year storm to the 100-year storm. What we're hoping for overall, you want to see the 25-year storm passing, so 100% capacity on that 25-year storm. As we can see, approximately half of the culverts were passing for the 25-year storms. Yep. And the ones that fully pass are in green. The ones that, for the most part, pass, but not quite, are in yellow. And then ones that do not pass are in red. And then here is that same map as before, except color coded by the capacity of the culvert. So once again, we have ranging from a 2-year storm to 25-year storm on this map, with red being less than 2, all the way up to that green color being 25. And a few notes on the mapping. The drainage area mapping that we did was only able to account for surface drainage, because that's what we can assess via field data and the remotely sensed terrain data. So any subsurface drainage that exists, we were unable to assess at this point. So particularly drainage area.
8.
Yeah, I believe drainage area 8. As you can see, it's relatively small, and with the flows that we modeled just for the surface drainage in that drainage area, it is passing for the 25-year storm. However, when we examined that culvert in the field, the drainage area is not south. So drainage area 9 and drainage area 10 were not showing a lot of water flowing through, even in high flow conditions, versus that one was definitely showing significant amounts of water. So there's still some calibration we need to do once we're able to find out more about subsurface drainage in the watersheds.
Does everyone know what we're talking about with subsurface drainage, tile drains, and other things? Yeah, see on the surface, they're pretty common in the agricultural field.
I saw one person shaking no, and so it's a fairly common practice, especially in any areas where you have really heavy soils, and so you can lay down these really long underground, usually black plastic pipes that have holes in them, and they're buried a few feet down, and they help to drain, they help to dry the soil out, and so it can be really beneficial in terms of keeping the soil, the farm's fields, from being too mucky and being workable. But it also really changes how water moves around in the landscape. Yeah, do you want to add?
So, you guys are gonna be going through, digging up the road, put culverts under the road in different areas, so it's gonna be out.
So we will be working with the town to identify areas where, because some of the culverts that are under capacity are also in poor condition. So our recommendations will definitely be to prioritize those for upsizing. But you also have to figure out, that improves drainage along the road. That doesn't do anything for water quality. And so we're going to get into shortly some of the ideas that we have for trying to do both. But that's a question for Dave.
The park. Culver Park generally doesn't open until, what's it, Memorial Day?
Yeah, but
Oh, it was closed in the summer because of the bacteria in the water. It was because of water quality in the lake.
Yeah,
The beach was closed, but the park itself was open. Was it from the? Yeah, it was from all the big heavy rains we were getting, and all the water that was, or all the soil and the silt and the clay that was coming out with in the streams was going out into the lake. And then that was taking the phosphorus and increasing the potential for algae blooms. And then we were also, we test the water every week during the summer. So we know if we can open it or not.
Yeah, we're just wondering what the
and the blue-green algae is what's closing down the beaches everywhere. And that is definitely both a small scale and a large scale problem. So if you do have some bad water flowing in right in one spot, that definitely affects that area. But once things hit the lake, it does spread out. So it's more an example of what's happening for the entire, northern portion of this section of the lake. And it can be affected by the last couple summers have been particularly bad because blue-green algae likes hot water, sunny days, and lots of dirty water coming in. And so we have these prolonged droughts and then these really heavy rains. And so that flushes a whole bunch of dirty water in. So it has been particularly bad. But also a lot of it is a wind factor. And if you've got sustained, wind from the southwest, that's pushing that, because the blue-green algae move with the wind and they're up on the surface. And so, that's one of the reasons why St. Albans Bay it gets so bad with the blue-green algae is because the wind blows it in and traps it in there. And there's, warmer water and a lot of nutrients in the bay. But yes, that dirty water flowing through the ditches and into the lake right along your local area is not helping keep the beaches open.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'm not sure you mentioned it, but on this map, anywhere where there's a green, generally you could say that culvert meets a town standard for the design flow. Typically, the design flow is a 25-year storm. So in other words, if the town's going to put in a culvert, and maybe that is, I don't know, Dave, if that's their considerations for bigger storms, is a more and more common today as we're seeing bigger storms and more frequent storms. But wherever you see a green here, that indicates the culvert is probably about there, and meeting the standard. Wherever you see a red, that means it's well below that standard. Point that out. There's quite a bit of red on there. There's also quite a bit of green. It's mine now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now shifting gears a little bit, what's up on the screen now is called the Beers Atlas. It's an old historic map from read the fine print there, 1857. So we had to hire a sub-consultant, archaeological consulting firm. And the reason that is because anytime a town gets money to do a scoping study like this, VTrans or the funding agency says, you got to think about any and all possible impacts that you might have if you do a project here. We know that there's, especially along the lake, a lot of, historical, archaeological, Native American areas of interest. In fact, there's a bunch of areas that have been documented along Maquam shore. So we just got the report today. I figured I'd put this up here. Basically, in a nutshell, what it says is, the whole area along the lake is potentially historically sensitive from Native American encampments, which is pretty interesting. But in particular, the southern side, so where the road bends away from the lake, in that area is particularly sensitive. And so, in fact, some artifacts and things have been found along there. We have, I guess Dave's mentioned that in talking to some of the people that work here in the DPW, just anecdotes of, walking out in the fields and in past years and finding arrowheads and things. I don't know, maybe some of you are familiar with that, but it's certainly a consideration we need to keep in mind if we're going to cite a practice like a stormwater pond, on the uphill side of the road to try to slow that water down. We need to make sure that we're not doing that in an area that could potentially impact those artifacts. So we're not doing any field testing at this point. It's more just a broad brush, like where could things be said?
And then one other constraint that we're going to look at once it's more spring conditions out there is are there any jurisdictional wetlands, or there definitely are. Where are the jurisdictional wetlands along the road? Because it is almost impossible to get a permit to do a stormwater improvement if there is a large enough good quality wetland along the road, and there are definitely at least some. So that's another piece that we will be looking at in the next couple months. Yeah, so I guess I can talk through, this is our only slide with lots of words, so apologies for that. But so kind of the next steps for our project is we are going to do more work looking at the culverts, and we kind of talked through all that already. And then we are going to start flagging areas that would be feasible based on some of the information that we already have, which is utilities, and then the results of the archaeology preliminary study, mapping of wetlands, and then also probably some landowner outreach at this point. just to figure out like where are there areas along the road where we could do something to both reduce the amount of water and clean up the water. And so then once we kind of have a short list of those, then we're gonna go back into the modeling space and figure out, you know, like what locations could we actually fit something that's big enough or appropriately sized to make a difference. And then we will work with the town and private landowners to kind of come up with a list that's feasible and meaningful. And then we'll work on site prioritization. And then one of our deliverables are preliminary conceptual design. So this is kind of a packet of information and maybe some like rough plans, which are all set up to facilitate getting more grant money. And so that's information that the town can then take and work with the state or other entities to get more money to support getting these projects towards construction. That's just kind of how the process works on these types of projects. And there, just in the last couple of years, there's been a total change in how a lot of projects are funded, and it's all about how cost effective can you remove phosphorus. And so, you know, the ideal project gets a lot of phosphorus for not that much money, and this setting should work pretty well for that because there's a lot of phosphorus coming down through from development along the road and from the farms up above the road going down, and there's an obvious like strong water quality benefit to it. So they should be a pretty good place to tap into the current funding structures. And then there will be another public meeting towards the end to discuss our projects that we want to present as, you know, future for implementation. So I just have a couple, I'm hoping you can see these well enough, but just a couple examples of some of the projects that we're going to consider. This is based on work we've done in other areas similar to this. This one's just a picture of you know, a flooded out swale. But if you move on to the next one. So these are structural stormwater practices, and these are the most expensive options. And you know, probably the most impact in terms of like need a lot of space, but they also have by far the most capacity to take on water and clean the water up. And so, you know, if it is feasible to put in, so a wet pond is basically just the standard stormwater pond that you see. There's a lot of them around like office buildings and things like that, but you know, it's just a big pond. They can hold many feet of water. They're useful for this setting because they have the most volume per footprint of any of the stormwater practices. So they can take on a lot of water and then slowly release it. And while that water is being stored, sediment and nutrients fall out of it and get trapped. So, you know, probably also the hardest of the practices to find a spot where they're feasible along the Maquam shore, but definitely something we'll consider. Gravel wetlands are preferred by the state in terms of they have superior phosphorus removal over wet ponds, but they don't handle as much water. And they're more expensive. And so gravel wetlands, you know, either need a larger footprint or they just don't treat as much water, but they are very good at removing phosphorus.
And a gravel wetland is essentially a big basin full of pea stone or gravel. So when the water comes in, it hits that mass and moves very slowly through that mass of stone. And there's other biology happening around the stone to help, you know, remove the nutrients that come into the water.
And then now we're going to move up into some of the things that can happen in the farm parcels. And these are all practices that can have support from NRCS funding. They also are eligible. Some of these are eligible for funding through these newer phosphorus cleanup mechanisms that I was discussing earlier. So the first one, this is one being constructed a couple years ago in Franklin. It's basically a farm version of a wet pond. It's called a water and sediment control basin. It's very simple, but these can be done in the middle of a field, on the edge of a field. They can be done closer to the road, and it is an accepted practice with, you know, additional funding available to support it. But it's basically just a wet pond. And then there's a whole suite of practices that can be done kind of up in the fields. And these obviously would require, strong coordination, communication with the farmers. But there are a suite of NRCS practices that are designed to reduce runoff and improve water quality while minimizing loss of income. And so, there's the things like cover cropping. There are buffer planting strips where you actually alternate in the same field, you alternate corn and hay so that the water that flows fast through the corn then slows down through the hay. But there's enough of each so the farmer can harvest both and still make money. Reduced tillage, no tillage. This has really taken off in parts of Franklin County where NRCS has really gotten involved, and that's just a sort of different way of treating the fields at the end of the season, which reduces runoff over the winter and also helps the soil soak up more water in the spring. And then there are a bunch of different ways to manage swales, through farm fields and around them that slow the water down and help clean it up some before it gets down, in this case, to the road. And then another one that is, we've helped with the implementation of a few of these in the area. It's called a two-stage ditch. And this one is a good way to combine the two sources of funding that are out there. It's an accepted NRCS practice where basically you take a farm ditch and you dig out a floodplain on one or both sides of it. And it gives the water space to flood out and slow down and then come in contact with a bunch of plants and soak up nutrients. And so these are a nice practice, and they're getting more popular in Vermont.
This is in contrast to the V-shaped ditch that you see a lot where, the deep, narrow ditch, it moves water very efficiently. What these ditches were, designed or constructed to do. We're just trying to keep that water in the same general area, but spread it out a little to get some of those water quality back.
I believe that's it. Yeah, so then I guess just open it up for general questions, discussion. Public concerns.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Dan Haley. I live on Palm Shore Road. And I agree with everything that I've just heard, but I'd like to add another concern, if you would. And that would have to be, the rain came down so heavy. I'll give you the short version of my story, but the rains came down so heavy. I had a lake in my backyard, which is on the east side of the road, to the point where I was worried that water was actually going to go over my foundation wall into the basement. I manually dug a ditch to move that water from the backyard to the front yard, which is right on Maquam Shore Road, so to speak. But the culvert there is either blocked or plugged. So essentially all we did was move the lake from the backyard to the front yard until we dug a secondary ditch across the farmer's access road to give the water a place to go. So I guess I'm trying to make 2 points here. The culvert next to our property is way too small and plugged. And secondly, I think we need to consider there was so much water coming down from the agricultural area. I mean, I literally had a lake in my backyard that was deeper than my ankle, but not quite to my knee. And it developed frighteningly fast. So I would raise those 2 concerns. I mean, some houses potentially are going to have water in their basement from all this runoff. Mine was potentially one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave sitting over here is your best contact if you have a culvert that is not working properly. He's the person you should contact about that. Last summer was really, really bad in terms of how the rainfall came down and both the frequency and the intensity, and the soil never dried out. And in these areas like Maquam Shore, where you have really clay heavy soils, they just, it almost runs off like a parking lot when that soil is saturated, and it was saturated for months. So, certainly it will hopefully be better if we have a more normal weather summer, but your observations, we've seen that many places.
So let me just add, I did reach out to somebody in the town, and the response that I received was the town manages culverts that go underneath Maquam Shore Road, but those next to Maquam Shore Road are homeowner responsibilities. So I would like consideration when we put this, when you put this plan together. You know, that larger culverts are put in. So I don't get flooded.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing your address?
Sure. And oh, by the way, it's not our land, by the way, where the culvert is. It's 4911 Maquam Shore Road. It used to be 755.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. That was a great public concern, so. Oh, you keep prepared.
That's his side yard.
Yep. Yeah, yep, I know.
You want to just speak up, you can, I can just, or you can go up to the mic if you want to. That's totally up to you.
My name's Joe. I live on 3085 Plum Shore, which is all the way up top of that #1 area. I think it's probably the last house. You pretty much get the entire field, my house, and the empty lot between neighbors next door. We pretty much get that entire field in our backyard. Last year, this summer, I ended up having the front of my yard very flooded. And if this has been, I've been there a few years, and this has always happened in the spring. That's no big deal. The winter thaw, but this was just from serious rain in the summer, and it got to the point where my leach field for my septic system isn't close to the road, but it got to the point where it covered it completely. That's a problem. I spoke to the town, spoke to a couple people here, and was told that what needed to be done was similar to what the gentleman just said. The culvert at the end of the road was completely flooded. And then the empty lot in between my property and where the water will flow was higher than the pipe. So the water isn't gonna go anywhere, it's gonna just sit there. And I complained about this probably a couple years, and this last storm, I finally had to do something about it, and I was told I had to pay for it out of my own pocket. Even though the empty lot was not my property. I ended up getting permission from Mr. and Mrs. Bissett, who owned the property, and they were nice enough to let me remove the water, remove the debris and dirt and everything, and the water was able to flow again. Luckily, that happened when we got a couple more storms. I had that done because the water was pretty crazy. We got a couple more storms that were equivalent. And I was curious what is gonna be done. I'm curious.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Culverts being opened up bigger.
Yeah, so, our mapping was, at least for at this point, was just looking at the town infrastructure. So those are the cross culverts that go under the road. And it is generally, like culverts that are in the ditch parallel to the road, or driveway culverts that are associated with the, individual houses, but, Dave can speak more to that, with how that works in this town. But so, certainly any culvert that we have as red, those are dramatically undersized for how we have the drainage area map. And obviously your observation lines up with what we're showing. So, we will make a priority list based on both the culvert size and capacity. And Julie just last summer, we recently did a full culvertory analysis where they inventoried everything and said the condition of the culverts. And so, some of these culverts are undersized and in very bad conditions. Those will be the absolute highest priority, and we'll kind of work through the list from there.
You say that there's grants.
That's at the town question.
Well, yeah, if we can identify a big project, then we can go after grants for it. And that's what we would do, because obviously if we don't get any grant money, we can't do the projects. I mean, we can't expect the whole town to do all the stormwater projects that we need to do in town. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of dollars to do everything the state wants us to do, and we're still identifying what we need to do. I can't address the driveway culverts, so, because if, I don't know if that was gonna be your question. Okay, so the driveway culverts, even though they're in our right of way, they don't belong to the town. We maintain the town's infrastructure, which is essentially the roads, but the access to each property is owned by the resident. If we were to take those over and have to deal with those, we'd have 10,000 culverts out there to do. And we can't afford that. We don't have the people, we don't have the time, we don't have the money. So that's why the driveway culverts are the responsibility of the homeowners. In some cases, if we're doing a road project or a big project where we know we have to, that if we do a project that is not gonna work because of this driveway culvert, then we might get in there and do it, but that would be on an individual basis. And clearly along the Maquam shore, those culverts, they could be 50, 60, 70 years old. And some of the clay pipe we saw in there, who knows how old those things are, even older. So that's kind of where the town's position is on the driveway culverts.
So I guess my other part of that question would be, what as homeowners need on our own to help along the process of slowing the water. Essentially, that's what it's all about, slowing it down. I'm not on the lake, I'm on. So you have some land that does flow eventually. Lake, I'm curious what we can do to help that.
Yeah, so, generally speaking, the best solution for stormwater is to let it soak into the ground. But that is just not really effective anywhere along the Maquam shore because the soils are so heavy. So, the next best thing you can do is to slow it down and to maximize how much contact the water has with vegetation. And so, I would love to, and I think I would write down your address, but it'd be great to look at your property because if you do have space, if we have a friendly landowner and space and too much water all in one place, then that's a really good spot to look at, would be a good opportunity to treat some stormwater. So.
And I'll add to that, and no conflicts with leach fields or.
Yes.
Right, I mean, that's the catch-22 here, right, like where we wanna, on the one hand, we wanna slow the water down, that's what we'll benefit, but slowing the water down. Can't propose to do that around your stuff.
So that's why we're trying to look at this thing globally. We have to look at the whole system and the whole area. You might change your driveway culvert and it may or may not fix the problem. It might move it down to the next person down the road. And it might do nothing just because of the amount of water. That's why we have to look at our stormwater treatment practices, make sure our conveyances are clear and sized appropriately, and then try and get it out into the lake as clean as we possibly can. And we know that a lot of those culverts that are going into the lake now are just plugged, and that's why things are backing up. But I mean, you saw the dirty water, and you've probably seen it on your own too. So that's why we really need to try and focus on this. I mean, the state's stormwater program is to help alleviate all this silt and clay water getting out into the lake and causing the algae blooms. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
So we get it's like
Okay. And you're on the east side or the west side of the road? From the lakeside, yeah. So there aren't, I guess Jake can answer this better than I can, but I don't think there are many ditches along the road on the lake side. For the most part, the ditch is continuous on the, east side, and then it collects all the water and then shoots it through the culverts, and then it goes kind of from there to the lake, and at that point, it's off town property and on private property.
So like, you know, on like lower new, the lower new.
Yeah.
Where it turns from lower new, well, that spot right there, there's fire.
Yep.
That is the water.
That- That's the one that,
Coming down.
Yeah.
We get, across from us. Our- there's some of that comes to the water.
Yeah, I observed that. That was on the field.
Yeah, basically, for us.
and so, a simple solution that would help you would be, if there is a town culvert under the road there that is not performing adequately, to get a bigger culvert in there. And that would help you so long as there is a nice, clean, safe path for that now increased volume of water to make it down to the lake. So that's kind of the next step is to figure out, because we don't want to, you absolutely could cause a problem if you open up a culvert that's been plugged for 30 years. And someone has a house down there now that doesn't have, appropriate drainage around it, so that all has to be looked at.
Across the road, they did it right across, it was done in town, did it right across the road from us, and watched the car driveway and entire beach.
But at, like, at the end of our driveway, we have our own folder, and then there's a town one right around.
It dropped out, plugged in cement, and it chiseled it. And plugged this cement there, but chiseled it open.
The concrete was the head wall to that clay pipe.
Oh.
But it was a little, I don't know, 20 feet down or something to the north.
Yeah.
But the one was plugged up that we tried to open up, and I think that was real close to you guys' property. Yeah. And then when it got over to that, it was that clay pipe culvert. A little bit of water ran in there, and then it started plugging up and it started backing up, and then what are you gonna do? And that's where that row of Sears is right on top of the culvert, and I'm sure the roots are just in there to have it all plugged up.
Yeah,
and it's just all needs to go.
Yeah,
And that's,
Sears that they come out, water partially.
yeah, yeah, and if that's gonna be replaced, all those trees are gonna have to come out of there, and no trees go back in. And that's on private property, so that's another question we have to grapple with. Okay.
There's a swale that's covered with property. It's pretty close at one area. And was kind of discussed with federal contractor, kind of figuring that out. I don't know. I don't know what it's supposed to do. Last year, I remember them saying that really bad. The property right the house is stuff.
yeah, I mean, I guess, I would need to look at your mapping a little better to know, is that something that the town under their purview, or if it's completely private? I mean, we can certainly get eyes on it when we're out in the field too.
We probably would take that. Part that goes straight into the.
Yep.
And the back side there. We take from the back side, one in front.
But if you do already have a swale and you have space, then that could also be a spot where it could be minor improvements to water quality that would help address your drainage issues, but also, you know, clean up the water some. So that could be a good spot for us to look at.
So I'm writing down all the addresses that everybody's telling me, and we'll go out and take a look. That's all I can say for now. We'll take a look and see what we can do, if anything.
Town next year, 5996. So we're at least a couple of years into collecting stormwater fees from every residents here in St. Albans. Just curious to know how that money is being spent, especially for our local neighborhood, Maquam Road. How is any of that money from those fees being spent to help improve this situation?
Okay, so, yep, so right now, the stormwater fees are funding Julie's position. We use it for local match to go after grants. And we've got a couple we've got one project that's ready to go to construction pretty close. We've got another one in design, and we've got this one kind of in planning right now. So we're just kind of in the infancy of getting all these things going, you know, because it's, you know, to manage a bunch of projects, you need to have some in the planning phase, some in the design, and some in construction. And once you get that going, you just kind of keep that momentum moving. And right now, we're still kind of in the infancy of this stormwater utility, trying to get these projects moving. Like I said, we've got one of them just about ready to go this year that we've got a grant for. We've got another one that we've got a grant for, and we're using all those fees for the local match. One of them is Tanglewood.
What's that?
Tanglewood. There's a lot of areas in town that have flooding issues and basement issues and stuff. And obviously we can't do them all at once. We've got this list of projects that, I don't know, it's got like 62 of them in there. And they've all been identified in what are called flow restoration plans. We've got 2 flow restoration plans. One's for Rugbrook and one's for Stevensbrook. And those projects are meant to help not only alleviate the sediment going out into the lake, but also, I see it's more importantly helping the homeowners in those areas. We've got a flow restoration plan for Stevensbrook. We haven't done a whole lot on the Stevensbrook side of things. And then we've got some of these other projects that we're trying to do now, which is down on the Maquam shore. And down there, we don't really know what we need to do just yet. And that's why we've got these guys on board. I hope that helps. I mean, it's not for replacing people's driveway culverts. And that's what people call me and ask me, you know, it's like, well, I'm paying $50. How can you not replacing my driveway culvert? I think I explained before that we can't really replace driveway culverts unless it's part of a bigger overall project that we need to do. That just won't absolutely work unless we have to do a culvert like that. I hope that answers your question. I hope it's clear. Thank you. That was a good question. I appreciate that.
During this lull, can I ask part 2 of my question?
Please.
So let's just say, by the way, I have great neighbors all the way around me. So let me throw that out there. But let's just say I solve this plugged driveway culvert that's crossing a farmer's access. It's a farmer's access road that has a 6-inch culvert that for the most part is plugged. No water's flowing through it. We manually dug a ditch to alleviate this lake in my front yard, but I really don't want to move all my water down to my neighbor. So I can't see your map. So his house is one house south of mine. The ditch carries the water down next to his driveway. And then there actually is a town culvert that then takes it underneath the road to the lake. I'm wondering if his was identified as a green or a red needs replacement culvert.
So
Someone made the comment earlier in this meeting. I don't want to just move our water and make it someone else's problem. You know what I mean?
So our color coding on the map is just for the town culverts. So, you know, like, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but if there's a, you know, if there's a 24-inch town culvert that's being fed by a 10-inch driveway culvert, then probably the driveway culvert is, you know, undersized. But we just looked up your address, so they're confirming right now to see where that winds up with the mapping. So hang on for just 1 second.
No, that's good. So that's what I was referring to, is that it is a town culvert taking the water from the ditch under the road to the lake.
Yep.
And hopefully that's been identified as either adequate or needs improvement.
Yep. And, you know, everything that we do will be, you know, we will have another meeting and there will be a report at the end that we publicly
Okay.
emit, which can then be used to kind of facilitate more discussions about specific properties.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it was Mr.
We are recording the whole meeting, and also I wanna send this presentation by email if you guys want, or put it in the website.
Is it Mr. Haley online? Was that your last name?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Was your address 491?
4911.
4911, thank you.
Used to be 755.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know my neighbor's address, but I know his name, but I don't want to blurt it out here in this town meeting.
Yeah, we can take a look at that in more detail once we're back at our computers.
Thank you.
And we can, we can add a cover sheet to the presentation with our contact info on it.
Yes.
So, and then anyone feel free to, you know, email or call us. So we'll add a page to this PDF before it gets
Okay.
distributed, so you'll have our info.
Yeah, I will send this presentation by the emails that you gave us, so.
This was great discussion. This was very good discussion. Got a lot of good notes to work through.
We do.
Maybe we'll have less crazy weather this summer, maybe.
Count on it. Well, if there are other thoughts or concerns that you want to share with the town, that to get to us, feel free to do that, and we'll consider anything and everything you bring up. Within reason.
Okay, thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
Appreciate it.